For more now, we turn to our political panel. Amy Walter, publisher and editor-in-chief of the Cook Political Report. Senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is here. And Nick Timiraos, chief economics correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, is also at the table. Good morning to all of you. So, Amy, we just heard Anthony's scenario here. This is not a red wave, but it is a Republican majority. Does it match with what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think the way that Anthony pointed it out is a very smart way of thinking about this. You know, elections, normal midterm elections, the challenge for the in-party usually is that their own side doesn't turn out. And that's where the other side is much more motivated. And when you see those big gains, like we saw, say, in 1994 or 2010 on the part of Republicans, this year we're seeing that Republicans and Democrats are motivated, Republicans a little bit more, but Democrats feel pretty good that they're at least getting more of their base turned out. Now, young voters being always a challenge for Democrats. But look, I think what happened over the course of the summer is that the issues surrounding abortion rights, plus the focus on Donald Trump, January 6th, and quite frankly, a little better of an economic picture gave some boost of enthusiasm to Democrats and got them energized in terms of the voters, more energized to turn out. But it feels as if that has pretty much stalled, that it hit this point and it hasn't really gone much further. And instead, where the focus is now, it's no longer as much about abortion or Donald Trump and much more about the things that Anthony pointed out, which is the economy, gas prices, and people feeling, quite frankly, pretty stuck.
And we frame this as, you know, sort of a choice with state of the economy and state of democracy. And Ed, in some of these recent political ads, I'm thinking about in Maloney's district, I was just watching one, they're changing the focus to be about extremism.
Yeah.
So not even talking about the affirmative case, but fear the other side.
Right. Not only in the realm of democracy and those concerns, but in the realm of abortion rights and Social Security and Medicare being ripped up or rethought. I watched Maloney this week actually make that exact argument to a bunch of seniors in an assisted living facility. He says, if you don't think they might come after your Social Security and Medicare, look what they just did to abortion rights after 50 years of threatening to do it. So that's kind of a way to make both arguments at the same time, but not make an explicit abortion argument. And that's the kind of pivoting that they've done here, now realizing that abortion isn't as urgent an issue. Part of the reason, one Republican I talked to this week said, look, you go look at mothers across the country who may be concerned about abortion rights, but they're not necessarily bumping up against the issue of abortion rights every day. They're bumping up against the fact that beef is costing 3 times as much as it did before. And those more urgent economic issues may be what's drawing people back over to the Republican side.
I want to come back to that issue of abortion in a second, but Nick, can you pick up on this? Because our poll shows 69% of voters describe the condition of the national economy as bad. Only 27% say it's good. You've got a piece saying, out in the Journal, saying basically American consumers are doing pretty well. Yeah. So why don't they feel that way?
Yeah, that's a great question, Margaret. You know, the issue here is that if you look at the labor market, 3.5% unemployment rate, what's not to like about that? But if you look at, what's happening with wages, they are not keeping up with prices. We had another report Friday that shows that Americans' wages are not keeping up with prices. And so those real income cuts, nobody likes that. You drive by the gas station, you see how expensive gas is, and you look at what's happening right now with interest rates. They've gone up a lot this year. Mortgage rates this week are above 7%. For the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. We haven't seen that since 2001. So, yes, on paper, there are things you can point to that look great, but people just don't feel great about it.
And we have this Fed meeting in the coming days. What are the conversations inside the Federal Reserve right now about when inflation gets better and what they plan to do?
Well, the problem for the Fed is that monetary policy takes time. It acts with a delay on the economy, so you can't see your moves right away. The Fed this year has raised interest rates at the fastest pace since the 1980s. Normally, they raise rates by a quarter point every 6 weeks or so. This year, they've been going at 0.75 of a percentage point. And when you don't have time to see how that influences the economy, it's like barreling down the highway, but using the rearview mirror to guide where you're going. It raises the risk that you're going to drive off the road. And the problem here for the Fed is they can't take a risk of not getting on top of this inflation, because even though the risk of doing too much is a recession, the risk of not doing enough is that inflation just stays high and you have to have a bigger downturn later.
And I mean, those are the details of it. That is monetary policy. What is it that Republicans are actually arguing, Ed, they can do? Because really, the reality is their hands are pretty tied here.
They are. If you read their websites, if you listen to what they say, they want to cut government spending. And in some cases, they want to see implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure bill that either they voted for or they don't want to admit that will help their districts, even if they voted against it. And go ahead.
Well, and that's the bottom line. When you're in charge and things are going well, you get the credit, a lot of which you don't deserve. When you're in charge and things aren't going well, you get the blame, even if you don't deserve all of it. And when you're the out party, you get the benefit of the doubt because voters are saying, well, I don't know if Ed can really fix this, but these folks who are in charge, they're not doing a very good job. Let's just give them a shot, which is why Democrats are doing the extremism thing. If people are upset with the status quo, which they clearly are, Democrats' only chance to hold on, especially in some of these Senate races, is to say the bigger risk is taking a risk on the other side. Staying with the status quo you don't like is uncomfortable, but not as bad.
And the other ironic thing, much like the Fed, the problem for the Biden administration and Democrats is a lot of their accomplishments are going to take time to be implemented.
Right.
The Medicare price cuts don't kick in until next year. The bridge isn't getting rebuilt until early 2024.
Right.
So they can talk about all these things in the abstract, but the voter can't see it yet. The president may know, come my re-election, if I'm running in 2024, people will see what I did, but they won't be able to see it before November 8th.
It's also kind of hard sometimes to message around market forces. An energy analyst that I speak to was pointing out, Ron Klain, the chief of staff to the president, tweets almost daily about the price of gas. He's like, why are they trying to own something they cannot control?
That is a question that the White House Chief of Staff is going to have to answer for. And not only is why are they tweeting about something that they can't control, why is he tweeting so much to begin with every morning about this and other issues when he perhaps should be running the White House? I've heard this from Democrats. I think we'll hear it a lot more from Democrats after the election if it goes south for them. It is an obsession for them because they know it is the psychological and the sort of data barometer that we've all used to measure inflation and the discussion about the economy. But yeah, it is something completely out of their control. And perhaps by doing that, it's, as that energy analyst noted, it may have drawn too much attention to the president and allows him to take more of the blame.
You have, Nick, in the Journal, a survey of economists putting the probability of recession over the next 12 months at 63%. So that is the Congress that Republicans would be walking in to control.
Yeah, and the issue here is the economy is slowing. We knew it was going to slow because we had a boom last year. But if it doesn't slow enough, if consumers keep spending the savings that they've accrued during the pandemic, then that just means the Fed is going to come in and raise interest rates more. This week we're going to get close to 4% on the policy rate that the Fed sets, but we could go closer to 5% next year. And there's a Fed chairman who used to say that it was the Fed's job to take the punch bowl away as the party was getting started. And that's what you're seeing this year. But if consumers keep spending money, we had very solid earnings reports this past week from United, Visa, Coca-Cola. If consumers keep spending, then Jay Powell's going to get on the phone and call the cops and say, we got to get the noise volume down in here. We got to get these people to go home because this is just not sustainable to have inflation continuing to run higher and higher and higher.
And it's hard to explain sometimes that some things are going to get more expensive by design. It's going to get more expensive for you to borrow money because of what's happening. Coming back to the issue of abortion, Amy and Ed, I think it's interesting that the dynamics seems to have changed on this in terms of bringing out voters. You were saying, Ed, that people feel inflation perhaps as a more immediate crisis than abortion access. I wonder, Amy, because it's so different state by state.
Right. That's what it's quite interesting, actually, where we're seeing Democratic, especially candidates for the House, having the most trouble is actually in blue states like Oregon, California, places where the issue of abortion is pretty well settled. Right. These are Democratic-run states. It's not an existential question.
Because the state has already
either codified or it's Democratic and the governor's candidates have all pledged to go forward in that way. It's the red and purple states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, where we know that this issue is not settled and where in Michigan, of course, they have a ballot initiative as well as a governor's race. You have governor's races in those other states. So there's much more of a of a friction there, right? About the decision being determined by your vote this November. That's not as apparent in some of these blue states.
Yeah, and the fact that they have to run into New York, Oregon, the president's going to New Mexico this week,
Right.
It all speaks to the fact that perhaps they may have miscalculated how abortion would work in those states, and how much money Republicans have to spend right now in the closing weeks to really put a bunch of Democrats on the ropes.
Good to have all three of you here. Thank you very much.